Welcome to the Living Unconventionally podcast. I am your host, Chris Piak. Every week, I feature a new unconventionalist who has ditched her desk in order to chase her passions around the world. Every Monday, we talk about their epic travel adventures. We also talk about how they make their travels happen from a financial standpoint. Every once in a while, I will coach an aspiring unconventionalist. Together, we will figure out her biggest dreams, why these dreams are so important to her, and what will be the first steps towards her goals. If you aspire to be an expatriate or a digital nomad who travels around the world and can make a living anywhere, join our community of like-minded, travel-loving, adventure-seeking people. Join the Living Unconventionally community at livingunconventionally.com/Facebook. Welcome to Living Unconventionally, episode 205. I'm your host, Chris Piak, and today we travel not only through space, but also through time. We visit Spain in the 80s, then we move to Canada, to South Korea, to many other places until we finally land in nowadays Dublin in Ireland. Welcome with me, our guest for Living Unconventionally 205. Here is Tamara. Imagine this. You are in sunny Spain. It's the 80s and you are just 16 years old. Tamara, how did this feel like for you?
For me, it felt like freedom. It was just such a different way of living from the life that I had back home. I was really fortunate to grow up in Los Angeles, which is a very vibrant, dynamic city. And the school that I attended had an opportunity for me to go to Spain for the summer and do a cultural and language immersion program. Other students had done it and encouraged me to do it, and I was really grateful that my parents supported me doing it. It's really not that common for, especially in the 80s, for young Americans to travel. And so I found myself sort of removed from the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles in this very small town on a very small island in Spain, where the day-to-day life was really different. And people talked to their neighbors, you were able to walk around and explore. And I just didn't have those same kind of freedoms in Los Angeles because it was just such a big city. And so for me, for the first time, I felt incredibly free. And it was just one of the things I often say was that experience catalyst for all the personal and professional decisions that I've made since then, really.
Mm-hmm. Can you share one situation that you experienced there where you especially felt this freedom and realized how valuable it is to you?
When we arrived, we were staying in a home that was my teacher from the United States, and they had a home in Spain. And I remember the first night we all went out to dinner, and it was our welcome dinner, and we were really excited, and we were in this sort of remote restaurant tucked away. And the waiter came and she told us we could have wine. And I know for a lot of Europeans, having wine when you're 16 isn't a big deal, but for Americans, it was such a big deal. And I remember having that feeling of this experience is going to be different. And each day we got the opportunity to, go and explore on our own, make relationships on our own, go out and test the language and practice and meet people. And it was, for me as a 16-year-old, liberating to, not sort of have this parental control around me. And I think, if anything, it taught me about my own personal accountability and personal responsibility of learning to be responsible when in an environment where it was sort of safe to practice and try new things. And so it was just a really incredible series of experiences. But I think what stands out for me the most is that really made me sort of aware of my own culture. I think when you grow up in your own community and your own culture, you're part of the norm. And it was the first time that I had gone abroad where I realized that not everybody really liked Americans, and that very critical about different parts of American culture and American politics. And so it made me a lot more aware of sort of my own cultural practices, my own cultural norms, and also how to be critical both of my own country as others. And so one of the experiences that I loved the most was sitting around with people my age from around the world, having really challenging conversations about where we came from and how it was different from other places. And it just was such a powerful learning that really made me realize that there was so much I didn't know about my own culture and others, and I really just wanted to learn and know more.
And you really did.
And I really did. And I didn't know, I mean, this sort of feeling summer long and, sort of one of the most poignant moments that stands out for me in my life is sitting there on the beach with my English teacher who from the United States. We were both topless because sunbathing topless in Spain and parts of Europe is quite common. It is really uncommon in the United States. It's actually illegal in most places. And so, by this time I had learned to be comfortable with that, which was a huge jump outside my comfort zone, much less with a teacher in my high school. But we did. We were sitting on the beach and talking, and I asked her, I said, what could I do for a living that would allow me to travel for the rest of my life? And I think it's probably the question I've ever asked in my life because it really did shape the sort of trajectory of my career. Her response was, you could teach English, which I didn't even really know was a career, because in the United States, if you take an English class, it really is sort of an English literature class or English grammar class. And the idea of teaching English as a foreign language or second language to other people was completely novel to me. But I did that day, beach, topless with my high school English teacher. I made the decision that that's what I was going to do for a living, and I was going to travel.
Mm-hmm. But in the end, you actually ended up doing something which I personally find even more fascinating. But we come to that a little bit later in the show. Let's take a second there to give people to catch up with us and to introduce yourself. We met you first when you were 16 years old in Spain at the beach. And where do we find you today? And then we talk after that about all the things that happened in between, which I can promise you, if you listen to this, is very, very interesting and exciting. Where you are right now, I would take a guess and say it's not that sunny.
It's definitely not that sunny. Today I live in Dublin, Ireland, and I have been here now for almost 2 years. It has been an incredible journey, but I've been here about 2 years. I just launched my new Irish-based business here a couple months ago. And it has been a fascinating 2 years exploring this beautiful, beautiful island.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come to Ireland? I mean, not by plane or boat, but what motivated you to go to Ireland?
So in part of my journey, I got married about 16 years ago. And when my husband and I first met, I had shared with him my desire to travel and live around the world. And he had not done it yet, but it was something that he wanted to do as well. And so it's something that with his job, there are opportunities to work in different places around the world. And the first time we went abroad with his work was Canada. And this is the second opportunity we've had with his job to relocate. And this was actually his dream location. When we first said, Ireland is a place I've always wanted to go and I can go with my job. And so for us to be here, it really is realizing both of our dreams. And so it was his job that brought us here, but it's something that he and I have been kind of planning and preparing for a very long time.
So it wasn't a hard sell for you to convince your husband that, hey, let's go and see the world.
No, not at all. It was almost a prerequisite for me. already a lifestyle choice and plan that I had made for myself. And so when I was, dating, really only interested in meeting and spending time with people who, if they hadn't already traveled, really wanted to see the world. And a lot of my friendships and relationships are people who share those same goals. It's sort of like start doing it, and once you start connecting with those people, I've really developed this powerful network of people that I'm able to travel the world with.
Yeah, that's something that we experience also here in the Living Unconventionally community, which is connected with this podcast, that there's actually, you find a certain type of people who share a worldview that's based on, I think, a lot of gratitude for the wonders of this world and the willingness to experience them, but also to share them with others. And this kind of people, they just find each other. And that's very wonderful and very encouraging, I think.
It is. It's actually, I have a group of friends that we've never lived in the same city together, that we've met abroad, we traveled together abroad, and we've never even lived in the same city, but we've managed to build a friendship and maintain friendships across borders, across countries. That has just been wonderful to me. So, every time I pick up my life and move abroad and move to another country, I certainly have people that I'm connected to in that community, but I also know that I'm part of a larger global community that I can tap into whenever I move around the world.
Mm-hmm. And since you lived in different countries, I would like to pick your brain a little bit, Tamara, and learn a little bit about each of the cities, the best sides of the cities, the best features of the cities, and the worst. Starting with where you are right now. When you think about Ireland or Dublin specifically, what's the one thing you love the most and why?
I love the Irish people. They are incredibly kind and welcoming and friendly. And I know people always, everywhere around the world, people are friendly and there's friendly people here. But I have been to almost 30 countries and never experienced the level of welcoming and kindness that the Irish express here. And that has made this experience for me so positive that both here in Dublin, and we travel to, cities around the country, people are just so happy that you've come to the country, whether you're visiting or here for a long time. They're ready, they ask you questions, and that has just made all the difference in the world for me being here.
Is it true? I've heard this from several people who are living in Ireland that one of the things that they really enjoy is when they travel abroad and they come home and they go to the border control, that the officer who will check their passport will greet them with "Welcome home."
That definitely happens in the U.S. When people return to the U.S., they get a welcome home. For me, when I come back to Ireland, the times I've traveled out of Ireland and I've come back, I'm not exactly sure what the border guards have said to me. It's in such a hurry. But I can tell you that my experience here has been quite welcoming. But I do know that for people who do come and relocate to Ireland, there are economic challenges around the cost of living in Dublin and the cost of housing in Dublin. I know that has been extremely challenging for a lot of people who have relocated here for jobs.
Yeah, Ireland has made an incredible development over the years. I remember when I was around about the time when you were in Spain, standing at the beach. I was in Paderborn, a remote part of Germany, and I had an Irish girlfriend. And I remember she told me she was from Dublin. She said, a house in Dublin at that time cost about 50,000 Deutsche Mark, which is like 25,000 euros.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So I know that people have found that a challenge. So, if people who've relocated to Dublin, if they're not getting housing assistance from the company that's sponsoring them, that can be a challenge. So I know that if you're thinking about relocating to Dublin for work, that having a company that supports you with finding and securing housing is like something highly sought after.
Mm-hmm. And besides housing, of course, from when you think about daily life, what's the one thing that you could do without?
It's hard to say because I really find everything here cozy, and I'm not sure if just because superficially there's quite a few similarities between the U.S. and Ireland, but I find public transportation quite easy, but I know that people that come from other cities extremely efficient public transportation don't find the transportation here that efficient. I think it's all relative. So for me, at this point, I don't have a lot of complaints. Although I would say it would be nice if eating out was a bit more affordable, because there is just a lot of fabulous restaurants here. So eating out can be a bit pricey, but incredible restaurants here. So most of the time, it's pretty worth it.
So what would you recommend for people who come to visit? What would you recommend for them to try and eat?
Seafood. The seafood here is phenomenal. And so in the U.S., I was in a landlocked state before we came here. And so I find the seafood here phenomenal. So there's seafood restaurants all over Dublin and all over the country, and the seafood chowder and mussels and all the white fish here. It's just fabulous. So I always encourage people to bypass the fish and chips, because you can get fish and chips anywhere, but really great fresh seafood at any of the phenomenal seafood restaurants here, and it'll blow you away.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. So we covered Spain, we covered Ireland, but you have been to a good number of countries in between where you actually lived.
So after my trip to Spain, I was able to, when I finished high school, do study abroad in France, which was a lot of fun, really helped me develop my French language skills. Probably one of my most impactful, and I will say still to this day, France is still one of my top 2 countries in the world to visit, and Paris is hands down my favorite city to visit. But when I finished university, I got a job teaching English in South Korea. Mm-hmm. And I had never in my life ever planned on going to South Korea. Originally, I had hoped to go to South America, and I ended up in South Korea.
So how did this happen? You wanted to go to South America. You ended up in South Korea. Bad navigation system?
No. I had been contracted by a large international English school, and they offered me a position in South Korea, and I had informed them that I had wanted to go to South America, and they said, they weren't sending people there. There were security concerns, and the pay in South Korea was twice what the pay would be for any positions that came available in South Korea or in South America. And, when you're right out of college and getting your first job, twice the pay sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So that really kind of motivated me, and I thought, well, I don't know very much, so I guess I'll learn. And it was a huge learning curve, right? This was the 90s. There was no internet. There was no email. So when you wanted to learn, you bought a book, you read up. But it really was, for me, that experience, a crash course in all things cross-cultural, because it took me about 2 days to realize not only did I know how to speak the language, but I wasn't even literate. Right. So as a Western person, an American person in Europe, restaurant in French and restaurant in Spanish still looks and sounds like restaurant, but not in Korean. And so within just a couple of days, I sort of had this panic, like, what have I done? How will I ever get a place where people look so different from me? The language is different, the alphabet is different. And I really thought that I would be able to do it. And I had never felt that way before. And it was a journey. I was there for a year, and it certainly came with its ups and downs.
Mm-hmm. May I ask at this point, I can really imagine this. You were still very young. You just finished university. You're in this completely new culture, and you can't orient yourself because you can't even read the street signs, because of course they're in Korean, which is a different alphabet. What was the first thing that you did to grab a handle on the situation? Did you say this in English? Grab a handle or get a handle?
Yeah. There were a couple of things that I did that I certainly connected with coworkers that were familiar with the culture and the language. That was really helpful to have some people in the beginning to help me navigate, because, just street signs, and you walk into a restaurant, the menu meant nothing. I went to go to the bathroom and there were two doors, symbols on it, and I had no idea which restroom to enter and had to wait for someone to come out. And so it was extremely disorienting. And I knew it was a steep learning curve. So finding some, what today I call cultural informants. And I always tell people, whenever you get to a country and culture that isn't familiar, to find help inform you about the culture that can act as a bridge. And so I connected with a couple of cultural people who had lived there, people who spoke a little bit of Korean. And that helped me in the initial phase. And then as soon as I could, I got myself into a Korean language course so that I could become literate. And here I am many, many years later from then. And here I'm studying Irish because as much as, English being the dominant and primary language here, there are a lot of signs in Irish. There are a lot of communities that only speak Irish. There are a lot of people with Irish names, and it can be very, very confusing. And so for me, being able to learn a little bit of the language has always been key to giving you sort of a foot into deepening your cultural understanding and for your own cultural adjustment process, because you can't help but feel insecure and incompetent when you go to purchase food and they tell you how much it is and you have no idea. So you don't know if you're overpaying or you're getting ripped off. So for me, that really reinforced that, I need to know what the letters are. I need to know my numbers. I need to know some basic things. And learning that language gave me tons of access to the community. And it was the same when I was in France. Mm-hmm. Even though I was in a French language program, a lot of my students didn't really speak that much French, but really learning the language and practicing and speaking with people and going out in the community and having conversations, it just gave me access to the culture and deepened my experience so much more. So for me, I just just recently I told somebody I was studying Irish and they said, well, how are you going to use that in everyday life? and I use it in my everyday life because it helps me understand and feel connected to the culture. And that when you Irish person you're studying Irish, it gets them excited. And when you see an Irish name that is spelled Nahm, I know that means Neve, which a lot of people wouldn't know. And so a great gateway. So that's been one of the things that's really worked for me.
Yeah, Tamara, actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because I agree it's very important if you come to a new place and to a new culture, you have to be proactive. Now, you have to reach out to people in order to build connection. At the same time, of course, the society that you enter also needs to be welcoming. So do you have a tip for travelers who want to go beyond, the typical tourist attractions and really immerse themselves into a society, into a culture? Do you have like some tricks that you could use to build a connection with a new person really, really fast?
Tips to build a connection with people really, really fast. I think for me, building strong social bonds over food, over drink, or common interests can be really powerful. Being willing to take risks and try new things can be really, really powerful. For me, somebody who has lived in different countries for extended periods of time, finding communities to volunteer in have been probably my most effective. For short-term stays, I think there's sort of all sorts of events and activities and ways to connect with people. But for people who are in longer stretches of time, finding places to volunteer in the community have really built strong ties for me and allowed me to explore parts of a country and culture that you might not to, right? I mean, tourism countries typically show tourists the best side of themselves. And when you volunteer with an organization, usually that organization is addressing a challenge or a need in the community that allows you to see sort of a big picture of what's happening in that country, culture, and community. And that has been key for my long-term stays.
Yeah, I agree. And luckily, nowadays this is a little bit easier than it used to be. because there are communities like Internations, for example, where you can start connecting with other world travelers, other expats in that city. We had Malte Zeg, the CEO of Internations, in an interview here a few podcast episodes back. And I know that Internations, for example, they try to offer the services more even to employers, so that it's easier to not only win talent for their company, but also to keep them there.
Absolutely.
Because if people are unhappy and don't feel connected, they are gone. So
yeah, absolutely.
So you lived in Spain, you lived in France, you lived in South Korea, in Ireland, in Canada. What's next for you?
What's next? I think that I think home might be next for me. I am turning 50 this year, which I'm so excited about. I have traveled to almost 30 countries. This is my 5th long-term stay abroad. And I feel like a lot of what I set out to do that day on the beach in Spain, I've accomplished. And I have been, particularly the last few years, really wanting to give back to my community and advocate to encourage a new generation of people to travel for short-term or long-term. And so that I really want to be a part of in my own community. We are anticipating being here a few more years, and then it's back to the States. It doesn't mean traveling by no means. That's a permanent part of my life. But I think for me, for this time, I am feeling a desire to be rooted back home, which is a new feeling. It wasn't a feeling I ever anticipated, because I have been on the go and been on the move and going abroad for extended stays since I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I have loved every minute of it. But now I am feeling a pull back home to be of service and to really help and inspire and equip other people to live the life that I bless, because I feel really, really blessed. And my work still takes me all over the world, and I love that.
Mm-hmm. Last question before we talk a little bit about how you're actually able to live this lifestyle, because of course traveling costs a lot of money. I was just wondering, because you said you want to go home, and you also feel that it's time to go home. But I'm curious to know what you think for yourself. What is home? Is it the United States, or is it Los Angeles? Or is it a time?
It's the United States. Yeah, I think it's definitely the United States. I think right now home for me feels like Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where we were before we came to Ireland. There is possibility that could change, but right now that feels my connection. I know in the international world, definitely not one of the most well-known or glamorous places, but it is a truly magical place, and I feel a real strong connection there, and have been part of different groups that have been trying to internationalize Albuquerque and national folks to Albuquerque and encourage more people from Albuquerque and the greater New Mexico to travel and explore the world. And I want to be a part of that. That's real exciting. And it's a funny thing about being a global nomad, is feeling a connection to home and figuring out what that home is, and hoping home is excited to have you as you may be to go back.
I'm sure Albuquerque will be happy to have you back. That's our show for today. If you want to get in touch with Tamara, visit tamarasorb.com, and I have a very special request for you. You see, my hope for this show is to leave you more happy, more inspired, and more empowered every single day after you listened to our show. And I want your help to know how I can do this even better. So just take 1 second to leave a comment here in the comment section of wherever you are listening to this podcast. If it's on iTunes, if it's on Android, if it's on the web, leave a very short comment and tell me 2 things. Number 1, what do you like the most about living unconventionally? And number 2, what is one thing you wished I would do differently? I promise I read all of your comments, and I am looking forward for your rating as well. It would really, really help me improve the show, so that every Monday I can inspire and empower you with a wonderful woman who embraced her life and chased her passions around the world. My name is Chris Piak, and we hear each other again next Monday.